Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
if you love freedom,
As government expands, liberty contracts.
if you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And good morning. This is Upfront Outspoken for your Friday. That's right, Friday. And if you know what Fridays mean, especially at this time of morning, if you're awake, it means we are assembling the round table. Of course, today it's going to be a dining room table, not a round table. We don't know what happened. We're going to keep watching because one of the panel isn't on yet. So as soon as he does come on, we will be bringing him. And I'm talking about Fred Brower of the Fred Brower Report. I knew Fred wanted to be part of this discussion today. However, host of Passionate Justice that you hear here every Saturday, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, is none other than Jonathan Wolfman. Hey, Jonathan, how is it in sweet Maryland?
Well, good morning, everybody. Bob, it's a bright, sunny, warmish day here. We've actually got the AC on, if you can believe it. It really does feel like the promise of summer for the first time.
Well, around here, they're expecting rain today, sometime after 8 o'clock this morning. So, so I got to go, as soon as I get off of air here, I've got to go travel in rain to get up to where my wife is, who's
well, listen, I know I speak for every one of your listeners. We just wish her the very, very best, a good, quick, solid diagnosis and fast healing.
Yeah, we're hoping. I mean, it's been crazy. We spent, with this particular run to the hospital, it's now well over $16,000, and that's just the emergency room bills alone.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and so they're going to be running a whatever that thing is, they stick down your throat to check out your esophagus and all that. Don't ask me. I'm not a doctor, but they're going to do that this morning. All I know, sometime after 7 o'clock. So hopefully I'll make it there before they take her have that procedure done. But getting into things today, and Fred, I knew, wanted to be part of this discussion, and like I said, for whatever reason, he's not available, but as soon as he does come online, we will be bringing him in, is the fact I've been watching social media lately, Jonathan, and it seems that we have lost what is commonly referred to as American pride, and that is, being proud of the fact that we are Americans in the sense of citizens of the United States. So I want to get your opinion on why have we lost this pride?
Well, let me say this to you. I feel a very specific kind of American pride that I'd like to share with your audience, and then if it's all right, then I'll address what you just asked.
Go right ahead.
The pride that I feel in America is what I think is American exceptionalism, and that is our brilliant United States Constitution, because it is solid, it gives us basic human rights, it sets up a structure for an ongoing, developing, not static nation. These guys who wrote that Constitution, to say that they were geniuses doesn't even begin to give an accurate description to what they knew we would need. It really is almost, to me, at the level of miraculous. So when I say, boy, you're right, I take pride in America, What I tend to mean when I say that, and it doesn't have to be what other people mean, I am so grateful. Really, the word for me is just as much as pride, if not more, grateful that we live in a country that tries to honor this Constitution.
You know, the thing is our founding fathers, even when the Constitution was being written, said right out that this was simply a framework. And when you hear that, you know that there is always going to be room for change, to allow for change over time. And as we know, I mean, how many amendments are there in the Constitution? I'm not aware, like 20 whatever. But the point being is that we have honed, do you want to say, as far as honing the Constitution to meet the current climate here in the United States? And for me, pride in America is something I take very dear. Number one, I am a veteran. I probably served in the United States Army, and for me, pride is the fact when I look at that flag, I look at the Old Glory, as many would say it. You know, I look at every one of those stars, all 50 of them, and I remember that at specific times in history, there were average Americans who were forced to defend their country against foreign invaders. And I'm not talking, the war, Revolutionary War. I'm talking about the invaders, 1812, the British. I'm talking about, 1941, December the 7th. I'm talking about 9/11, foreign invaders. And I realize all the Americans who shed blood in defense of the freedoms we so much enjoy today. So to me, that is American pride, but we're losing it.
And I have to just say, and I hope the audience doesn't feel I'm making a cheap plug here, because I really feel this strongly. It's one reason why Starcom, KKRP, independent radio can do what you've come up with to do at the end of this month, to really talk about, in the words of the soldiers, the men and women who lived it, the fall of Saigon at 40 years anniversary. It's so important. Look, we all have varying opinions on that war, on the Southeast Asian War. We all have varying opinions on should we have, how did we run it. All of those things should and are debatable in a democracy, but what I think we all agree on, and I've been making this point each week on my show, Passionate Justice, and in my blog writing, that you cannot, I think, rationally disagree with the idea that we as a culture treated those vets in particular very shabbily. And the other thing I would say too, is that ordinary citizens, I think, take more pride than our politicians. Our politicians love veterans until the moment they're elected. And then they go on and deny funding for the things that veterans and their families need. They cut funding for it. And then, guess what? I have to run again. Guess what? I love veterans. And it's a pretty shabby trick. And I think we ought to be onto it by now.
Yeah, and, as a point of reference, when you said about our veterans, earlier this week I aired a segment in which many people are now once again raising the issue of privatizing the VA, and the secretary of the Veterans Affairs was on the, I believe it was a Rachel Maddow show. And what people fail to realize, and it occurred to me, was the Veterans Administration, the hospital system in particular, it is, number one, the largest employer and trainer of doctors and nurses in the country. Number two.
Yeah, and people don't know that.
Right. Number two, they are the ones that invented the patch that smokers were wishing to quit use. And they've also were the very first to do a liver transplant. And they spent over $1 billion, you heard it right, folks, $1 billion a year in research against cancer, against other ailments. And yet, Capitol Hill is trying to open the door once again into privatization of the Veterans Administration. I think that's badly wrong. And one other thing I want to thank you, Jonathan, for bringing up is that on April the 30th, as Jonathan alluded to, is I will be doing a special on Wednesday. Now, I want you to listen to this, folks. On Wednesday, April the 30th. Why? Because it is the 40th, and I hate using the word anniversary, but it is 40 years ago on that exact day Saigon fell. And so what we are going to be doing is we have a few stories from veterans, plus we're also going to be hearing from Medal of Honor winners during that conflict. And it wasn't a war, it was actually a conflict. And I hope to raise awareness to the Vietnam issue. And I want to thank you again, Jonathan, for making that plug.
Oh, sure. And let me just say, on my show, either tomorrow or next week, we're going to have a Army doctor, long retired now, Rodney Rowe of Dr. Rod Rowe of Clayton, Georgia, a very small town in northeast Georgia, who was a medic in Vietnam. And because I know that we don't have all the time in the world on your commemoration, I'm going to do a kind of a teaser to inspire some more added interest in your show that you're going to do on the 30th. And so I hope people tune into that, because we don't tend to think about the doctors who put themselves, and the nurses who put themselves in harm's way over in Southeast Asia. So you guys can tune into that too tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Central.
And the thing is I guess even with my show that's coming up here, I guess it shows the fact that there are those of us in the broadcast industry that still retains that element of American pride. We're proud of our veterans. We're proud of our accomplishments, although there are times, I have to admit, that America has taken a slap in the face. But through it all, we have to rebuild the pride people have in America. And my point from the very start, Jonathan, is that for whatever reason, and I guess I'm asking, or throwing out a question, why has the citizenry of today, the younger generation, not yours and my generation, but the younger generation, why have they turned away from having pride in the country they were born and raised in?
I don't know, and I don't know the full extent to which they may have or may have not. I know my son is in the generation you're speaking about. He's 25, and I think he feels a very powerful pride, but I also think that he's more skeptical than many of us were. And I grew up in the anti-Vietnam War crowd. Because I thought it was wrong. I still think that it was a strategic mistake for the United States, and that has nothing to do with how poorly we treated those vets. We treated them very poorly. I still think you can have very different views on the Vietnam or, say, Iraq War from one another, and still demand that our vets be treated with respect and find the finest medical care around. I don't think, we sometimes live in America thinking we have to think in extremes. We don't have to think in extremes. We can criticize aspects of what our government does and still demand that the people who carry out the policies be treated with human dignity. I don't know why people think it has to be all. It's not a zero-sum game, and I know you know this, Bob. But it's too many of us, I think, don't. And I think one of the things my son's generation feels is they see this kind of contradiction in our generation, those of us in our late 50s, early 60s, and they look at us and say, how come you guys think in such stark terms all the time? It's got to be all one way or all the other way. And frankly, I think they're kind of right.
You know, the thing is like you, Jonathan. I grew up during the Vietnam era, and I'm not going to say I didn't. In fact, I served my country during that period of time, and I remember all the protests, which is the beauty of our Constitution, because we do have the right for peaceful assembly against our government. And you know, the thing that everyone, it seems to me that the younger generation today want to detach themselves from any association to what our veterans have done, what the Constitution that they'll gladly shroud themselves around, but the second they're asked to do something, they're going to say, no, I'm going to run to Canada, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, and they're instantaneously willing to just basically cut America down, but yet they fail to realize that the rights that they have, the rights that they shroud themselves around, it took blood, it took guts, it took hard work to get there. The Constitution was a framework. It's been amended. It has been refined. And it is, I think, in my opinion, and you can consider this maybe a mini rant or whatever, but it's just the idea that our younger generation are detaching themselves from the essence of what being an American is all about.
I have an idea of why of one reason that may have happened. One of the things that I think my part of the generation you and I are in, one of the things we got wrong was not so much our position on the Vietnam War itself, but I think we were wrong about the draft. What the draft did is it gave everybody a potential stake in what you're calling this aspect of American patriotism. The volunteer army, as much as I pushed for it 45 years ago, I was drop dead wrong. When you have a draft, everybody has potential skin in the game, as they say. And therefore, you have to be more caring about your social policies and your political and foreign policies. You have to be more aware of what your neighbors are doing. Look, if the college kid is just as likely to go to Afghanistan and get an arm blown off as the kid who grows up on the farm, as the kid who grows up and the only thing he possibly sees is factory life, then we all have that skin and limb in the game, and therefore we are forced to care more. I think we got a lot of things right in my generation about the war, about civil rights. We were right on civil rights. We were right on the idea that the war was not in America's interest as much as it was against our interest. I think we were right about that, but boy, were we dead wrong on the draft. We only saw the draft as a way of feeding that war. And if we had been smarter, if we had had a little more maturity, I'm talking about me, my generation, if we had been a little smarter, we would have realized that what the draft does is it makes us all have to think more and care more. One of the things about this younger generation that you're pointing out is they know, and they've known since well before they were, before they were born, kids knew that because there's a volunteer army, less than 1/5 of 1% of our young people ever have to serve. And so we can think of it almost as a mercenary army of, like the Hessians in the Revolutionary War. Why would we care about them? And I think that's been a terrible mistake, and it's had exactly the consequence that you raise.
And there are many issues that in our generation, Jonathan, that we blew. We blew it, in many ways, and it is affecting our young kid today, our young generation today. Now, I want to switch gears to something that happened to the boss here a few days ago. And, if anybody, the thing is it's called respect, okay? And here's, I know the boss is probably going to hate me for doing this, but I think in some ways it needs to be told. And, though the boss is probably going to, chew me out after this is all over with, well, that's fine, let him. But I believe what happened to the boss just a few days ago, I believe it was 2 days ago, is something that needs to be made aware to everyone out there. If anyone knows, the CEO of Starcom Media is preoperative. Now, if you don't understand what preoperative means, is that she is, from waist up, completely female. The only difference is she hasn't had the final surgery. She presents herself very much as a lady wherever she goes, whoever she meets, all of this. And the difference to it is if you try contacting her on the phone, she has a very masculine voice. There's no doubt about that. But she chuckles about it because of the fact that she, people right away, on the phone at least, hear that voice and they know, oh boy, we are dealing with a force to be reckoned with. Anybody that's talked to her will know this. But in public, wherever she goes, she is very ladylike, very, very feminine in her activities. And the other day, I wasn't able to pick up my wife from a hospital. Now, I'm not going to say what hospital at this time because things are going on there. But I had asked her if she would go and pick up my wife because they had given her a drug where she was unable to drive. Well, when she went into the emergency room, went up to the desk, and mind you, folks, she was completely attired, female, very ladylike. She walked up there, and the second she opened her mouth, the medical professional behind the counter in a waiting room full of people and in a manner in which everyone in that waiting room could hear, called her him, he, used all the male pronouns simply because of her voice. It humiliated her. It humiliated her beyond belief. And she works hard. Everyone here at the network knows she works very hard. And to be disrespected like that from a medical professional, to me, is a extremely unprofessional situation. So, Jonathan, I want to bring to you, have we as a society decided that I don't care what race you are, I don't care what your religion you are, I don't care what your sexual orientation is, I don't care any of that. Have we stooped to disrespecting people in general?
We're just not there yet. We're just not at the point, and it's so sad. We're just, and it's not only sad, it's a disgrace. Let's just put it where it is, that we do not have sufficient interpersonal respect to treat people as fellow humans on an equal basis. People are different from one another. The fact that we can't, as a society, even yet, with all of our abundance, we still treat each other as if we're all scrapping for the last morsel, whether it's morsel of food, morsel of domicile, morsel of basic human respect. I don't get it. Why in the world human differences emotionally undress people to the point where they would do to the CEO what they did the other day at that hospital? It just makes no damn sense. People, yes, is it unusual? Sure. And my response to that would be, so the hell what?
The other thing is I made a posting about the events that transpired.
I saw it.
Not just only on my Facebook page, but I also did it on a television stations, Channel 5 News, out of Fort Smith, Fayetteville. And I made that post on their Facebook page in the remarks section. And the one comment that came back, in my opinion, quantifies the narrow-mindedness of our society today. Now, this individual wrote, if it if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it walks like a dude, even in a dress, it's a dude. Now, the problem is, number one, that asshole doesn't know the boss, doesn't know how she walks. And if you've seen her, you couldn't tell the difference. The only thing is her voice. And like I said, she chuckles about it. So, but I mean, it is people like that person, in my judgment, that quantify the fact that we need the equal protections for, like I said, for, your race, your disability, your religion, sexual orientation. It's idiots like that quantify the fact how far we are still behind the 8 ball in giving respect.
We certainly are. I mean, that's why I used a moment ago the expression, that guy at the hospital and the guy on the Fort Smith news station website. They are emotionally undressed by difference. Really, when they make those kind of cliched and frankly stupid comments, shallow and stupid, the reason they're emotionally undressed is that they can't handle difference, and they're really commenting not so much about our CEO, but they're commenting about how shallow they are.
And I agree. I mean, it shows that. And, I'm surprised that I haven't heard more about it. I'm kind of amazed, in fact, that, I haven't gotten, or I haven't received, I keep using bad English here, but I haven't received any comments contrary to what I said. But the thing that bothers me is people like that who make those types of comments. If you go back through them, they're going to fall, many of them are going to fall on the Bible, say, oh, it's in the Bible, it's this, it's that, but they fail to realize there's also other passages in that Bible that eventually, I mean, if you believe in a heaven, you believe in a hell, they are going to have to answer to. And they fail to realize this, but yet they're so quick to judge.
You know this about me. I'm not a Christian, and yet my favorite, it's got to be one of my favorite lines from the Bible is in the New Testament. It's in the first gospel that you see, and that is Matthew. And in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is teaching his disciples a lesson about how to treat those who are seen differently by the majorities. And he says, you know, the way you treat them, that is exactly the way you are treating me. Now, if any so-called good Christian, good Jew, good Muslim can say that they respected the person, if not the deity of Jesus, and can't for Lord's sake understand that what Jesus is saying in that Matthew passage is that treating people with dignity and decency, that's precisely, if there is a God, that's precisely all he wants of us.
Yeah, and it seems people, like I said, the problem is you're, and and I use that term so often because that seems to be the only term people understand, and that is the Bible thumpers, the ultra Christian, or whatever the hell you want to call them. Okay, but they decide, okay, we're going to throw the Bible at you, but they, okay, throw the Bible at somebody, but if you're going to throw the Bible at them, you better make sure your sheet, your life, is squeaky clean and without sin.
Yeah, that's right. Cast the first stone.
Right.
Exactly.
And even in the Torah, Jonathan, I'm certain there are passages. I don't know if you call them passages or verses or what, but yeah. I'm certain that somewhere in that Torah is the same philosophy of, hey guys, you judge this person, you're going to be bringing judgment on yourself.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, again, a great rabbi was once asked, and this rabbi lived at the time of Jesus. His name was Hillel, and he lived in Jerusalem at the same time Jesus lived in and around Israel. And he was asked by a young student who was maybe a bit of a smartass. He said, okay, Rabbi, can you tell me the meaning of Torah while I stand on one leg? And of course, that was a smart-ass thing to ask the rabbi. But the rabbi looked at him, and he didn't scold him. And the Rabbi Hillel said, you know what? Treat people the way you know you deserve to be treated and want to be treated, and the rest will come later. Now go.
That's
he said,
short.
Go and study. But that's the essence of Torah, and isn't that the essence of what Jesus says in the New Testament too?
Exactly. But getting back to the issue of overall respect, I don't care who a person is. I don't look at them as, well, this guy's a little bit different. This guy's black. This guy is Asian. To me, and maybe it's just because of the fact that I've been in journalism too long, is I look at people for who they are on the inside, and very rarely do I, associate how a person looks with their voice. If I see a person wearing a pair of jeans and wearing a shirt, and they have the essentially the appearance of a man, I'll call him a man, or he, even if it's a lesbian, okay. And if I see someone that is completely attired in the opposite sex, I will call them ma'am, miss, out of respect, unless they tell me differently. It makes no difference to me, at least from my standpoint, that what a person's appearances are. You should, in life, address that person to how they appear, not because of a voice, not because of something else, but because of how they appear to you. And when a professional, a medical professional, has to humiliate somebody, it makes me wonder, was that some way of a inner satisfaction for this person to degrade?
And if so, And I would argue, if so, what is lacking in that guy? What the hell does he not have that he feels he has to do that?
Yeah, I wonder what he's trying to compensate for.
Because it's so crude. People think, oh well, it was just said. But when you just say that, when you just say, oh well, it was just a dumb thing to say, you're not taking into account the genuine offense that's involved. You're not taking into account the genuine hurt that causes. We have no business to go around hurting people for the sake of hurting people. It's stupid.
I agree. I agree 100%. So, so everybody out there knows the boss, she decided to raise a little Cain. And I'm not going to, I can tell you kind of what she did. She took it to the person in charge of the patient experience, but she also, because of her position, she took it to the COO of that hospital. So, I'm assuming that this investigation is going to be, is probably going to draw up some severe fallacies in that particular hospital's policies.
Well, at the very least, the fellow should get a written reprimand. It ought to be in his personnel file, and they ought to take a look at whether or not there ought to be. I know people make fun. Insensitive people make fun of the term sensitivity training, but boy, sometimes it's necessary, and maybe that hospital needs a thoroughgoing lesson.
I honestly do. I honestly think that's something they need to really investigate. So what I'm saying to everybody out there, and this is my opinion, and you might have your own opinion, just because you see somebody, don't form an opinion. If you're going to say something, address them as they appear. No matter what the voice, no matter what, address them as they appear. If they're attired female and and even though they may have that handicap of a more masculine voice, address them in
Absolutely.
the gender, and the same thing goes. You might find, as lesbians say, a butch, which is, a woman who dresses very masculinely. Address her appropriately. Please do. Okay. The other issue I want to get into. I mean, we've got about 14 minutes to go here. Is the current. Wow, I don't want to say the current political environment within the campaign 2016 is fully in bloom. However, it has already started. You have Rand Paul. You've got Ted Cruz. You've got Marco Rubio. And, of course, you have Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary, in the last couple of days, has come out very specific on certain issues. But on the GOP ticket, we're still hearing, the same rhetoric, the same this, the same that, going way back to the Reagan years. And I would like to ask you, if you had the opportunity to ask someone, on that Republican ticket, to ask them a specific question, do you honestly think they would respond, or would they give you the rhetoric?
I think I would ask them to really lay out how they plan to get young people and Hispanic people excited about voting for a party whose platform is just so, at least seemingly, working against what they have traditionally seen as their interests. You take a guy like Rubio who says, oh, I'm going to get the young people. Okay, well, even young Republicans, by a small majority, are in favor of equality in marriage. Even young Republicans are in favor of the kind of immigration reform that Rubio first started going for, and then the Tea Party scared the crap out of him, and then he ran from it as far as he possibly could. Now, there's not a very strong man there, okay. I would ask a guy like Rubio or even Rand Paul, how do you plan to get into even the young Republicans, let alone the traditional Democratic voters, if you can't even budge on those issues, if you're so tied to the Christian religious right, and yes, the Jewish religious right, and the Tea Party? I don't see how they could possibly win a national election at this point, unless the Democratic candidate makes so many unforced errors and just implodes.
You know, the thing is, when you brought up about Marco Rubio, he is trying to get the younger generation involved. But yet, you know, all of the current polls coming out is he is failing miserably at connecting with the generation or the demographic he's been targeting. And he's failing miserably in that respect.
That's right.
You know, and I'm wondering, you know, given what is going on in Washington, all right, and we know there's going to be many different issues coming before it. We got the TPP, we've got the Iran deal, we've got, you know, several other things coming up. And, you know, I want to ask is, if the Iran deal is signed, I shouldn't say deal, it's going to be an agreement, and it goes, let's say it does go through, and the Congress indeed does have the right to say yes, no, and because of their innate hatred towards this administration, if they shut this deal down and say, no, we're not going to be a party of it, you know, is that going to be an obstacle they will never be able to overcome when it comes to election time?
I mean, I think part of the answer to that depends on whether or not we're really close to or at war with Iran. I really think that people have to be smart about this and realize that even if you signed an imperfect, and there is no such thing as a perfect, whether you call it, as you said a few weeks ago, whether you call it a treaty, an agreement, there's no such thing as something perfect. The reason countries get together who have strong different opinions to make these agreements is to some extent compromise. If you think you can make an agreement with some hostile or a country that had formerly been hostile to you, that doesn't involve compromise, you're living in a fantasy land. But the question really is, why don't people realize that we always have the option of bombing the living hell out of them? We always have that option. An agreement doesn't mean you give up that option. The Republicans are talking as if we signed such an accord. If we sign such an accord, we're all of a sudden throwing our airplanes into the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. What kind of nonsense is that? We can always go to war. The question is, do you want going to war with Iran, which is not a little pipsqueak country, by the way, but do you want to go to war with Iran, or do you want to try to corral their potential nuclear program?
Well,
I'd try.
Well, even if, let's say, even if they don't, you know, the hawks decide, no, we don't want to get into any kind of conflict, but we're going to turn this whole situation with Iran down simply because the administration brought it to us, and we know that in 2017 a new president's going to be in that office, and then we can renegotiate. You know, we've heard the Ayatollah, okay, and we've also heard John McCain. You know, he literally called John Kerry a liar. I mean, he literally called John Kerry a liar on this deal without those guys even seeing this damn thing. You know?
Yeah, and the thing about John McCain is that I don't really dislike the man, but he seems unable to function if he's not backing some notion of war. And I get it. I understand his personal, I think I understand, I'm trying to understand the fact that when he was so young, he was so badly treated in Vietnam. I get it. I think I get it. I can't get it the way he does, and I'm trying. But I don't think that his experiences as a 20-year-old man should dictate our foreign policy 50, 60 years later.
Well, why I agree with that. It's just that the point I guess I'm trying to make here, Jonathan, is that the Republicans have a severe image issue. Let's try to be polite. Let's try to keep it politically correct. Although I would love to say what I'm really thinking, but they have this image problem, and there are several pieces of legislation that will be coming through this Congress that will affect everyone, and I'm talking about everyone. And on some of this, we've already know where Rubio, where Rand Paul, where Ted Cruz stands on Obamacare. Okay, we now know where Hillary Clinton stands. She's going to be 100% behind it, going to reinforce it. But yet you have the Republicans who are going to do everything again, as I've tried multiple times, to shoot it down, to disassemble it, everything. The image people see is what they're going to vote for. And right now, if there was one other than Iran, what would be the most important thing the Republican Party would have to do to reverse the current image issue?
Well, I think that the one thing they would have to swallow to not only reverse their image issue, but to make that reversal of image actually work for them in a presidential election, because that's the real ball game, making that image work for them in a presidential election, and not just in the states, not just in state elections. They'd have to talk turkey about immigration, and they're refusing to, because they are hogtied by the Tea Party, who will not look at it. They will not look at it. We were close. Remember, the Senate has passed. The Senate has passed an immigration reform bill that the president said, you know what, I don't love it, but I like it, and I'll sign it. The House of Representatives, which is really a Tea Party House in terms of how it functions, which means it doesn't function, it will not sit still for anything. But what they're really doing is signing their death warrant as a political party in presidential elections. I don't really see the argument on the other side of that.
Now, we've only got a couple minutes left here, Jonathan, and I want to ask you, and we're going to be playing devil's advocate here now. We know where Hillary Clinton stands on many of the issues, same-sex marriage. We know that she supports the average American. What would it take? Now, people are going to bring up Benghazi, and I've talked about that issue here, and there's been multiple hearings about it. What's the one thing that would shoot Hillary Clinton's campaign in the foot and then therefore cost her the election?
I think that I don't think it's so much an issue that would do it. I think if she can't get past her personality's tendency to not roll with punches, to become so brittle, and what comes off as snobby, let's be really honest, she comes off as highfalutin and snobby. I came from a poor background, but I made it, and the rest of you can, go blow. I mean, when she gets tough questions, she gets brittle as peanut brittle. And if she can avoid that, I don't think Benghazi is an issue. I don't think that idiotic old stuff about her so-called murder of Vincent Foster is going to go anywhere. I think she's going to be able to handle the attacks from the far left, the Elizabeth Warren thing, very well. I think. Look, I still have a very close friend. In fact, the this year's sponsor of my show, his mom, the sponsor of Passionate Justice, his mom is a big Elizabeth Warren fan, and I can't convince her that what Hillary has almost certainly done is promised Elizabeth Warren a seat on the Supreme Court of the United States. After all, Liz Warren is a law professor. She's a legal scholar. She would be much happier, I think, as a Supreme Court justice than as the President of the United States. I think that's where Hillary's going with that. But again, going back to your question, I think Hillary can shoot herself in the foot if she comes off as easily rattled.
You know, the other thing that I have issue about is people are going to be bringing up, what was it? That deal with the real estate issue. They're going to be bringing
Whitewater.
That's it, Whitewater. They're also going to be bringing up the fact of she's Bill Clinton's, husband, and look what happened with Monica Lewinsky. The whole problem is if you look at Hillary, and this is where I see this whole campaign going. It's going to be a mudslinging thing. The GOP has already started it, and the record of Hillary Clinton needs to be looked at. Not the fact she's married to Bill Clinton. Her record needs to be looked at, and if she can, like you said, if she can overcome that, and if she can convince the American people of all of this, then I'm almost certain, as long as she stays truthful, doesn't act highfalutin or whatever, she's going to have a really, really a smooth sailing shot towards the White House. And the only
I agree with you.
And the only one I can see even giving her a close competition from the Republican ticket would be Jeb Bush. We haven't heard from him.
And I have felt that for a very long time. You and I are in sync on that too. I think Jeb would give her a real run for her money. I mean, after all, Florida is Florida. And that reminds me to say this too. I honestly think that Marco Rubio is not in it for the presidential nomination. I think he wants the vice presidential nomination.
Well,
his problem is that you can't have a president and vice president, at least traditionally, from the same state. So if Jeb gets it, he won't choose Rubio, I don't think.
Well, we're going to have to end it right there for today, Jonathan, because our time is definitely up, and I have to get out of here. I've got to get up to the hospital. And so, Jonathan, I am asking you to stand by, everybody else. It's time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, Ed Till will be with you till 4 o'clock. Until Monday, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.